So make sure all our answers are in radians now. So first one we got to solve, so we got to get the trig function by itself. Well, it just so happens that's already done for us, isn't it? So all we have to really do is just say cosine of what angle gives us the value of -1. Like I told you guys, when sine or cosine and we're looking at 0, 1, -1, then you're basically just looking at the unit circle at its endpoints. So, and looking for cosine, which deals with what values, guys? X values. So where's x equal to -1? At pi. So the answer is pi. Is x equal to -1 anywhere else in this unit circle? No. So there's only one answer for this one. So the combinations you'll have is either from 1 up to 4 answers on these type of solving problems, okay? So then we come over to the next one, and we have tangent squared is equal to 1. What do we do to get tangent by itself? Square root it. So you square root both sides, you get tangent of x is equal to, and as I told you, if you take a square root, guys, it's always going to be plus or minus. So then we look at tangent. Now tangent being equal to 1 is what angle? Close. Say that again. Not root 4 over 2. Well, look above. Let's see. Tangent, let's go break it down this way. Tangent breaks down to sine over cosine or y over x. In other words, for this to equal 1, what has to be true about the x and y value? They have to be equal to each other. So with that being said, let's go back. Where is sine and cosine equal to each other? Pi over 4. So our answer ends up being pi over 4. And the good thing about plus or minus, guys, is you don't have to determine what quadrant you're in. You don't have to determine where it's positive or it's negative. You can just go ahead and say, hey, plus or minus means it's all 4 quadrants. So put pi over 4 into all 4 quadrants, okay? So we go through -1, +1, times 2 minus 1. On to number 3. So, what do we do to solve this, guys? Come on now. Add 1. Can somebody else besides Johnny answer that question, please? I know it's Friday morning and some of you are still trying to wake up, but we got to get started. Whoa. What's next? Divide by 4. Thanks for chiming in. And then finally it's sine squared, so what do we do? Square roots. Now, what I'd like for you to do, guys, is we're going to take this one step by step, okay? As you can tell, when you say the square root of a fraction, I break it up to the square root of the top over the square root of the bottom. And then from there we go, what's the square root of 1? 1, square root of 4, 2, and of course it's square root, so it's plus or minus. Again, lucky scenario here, because if it's plus or minus, how many answers are going to have, guys? All of them, which is going to be 4, right? Anytime you have plus or minus, anytime you have to take a square root, just know you're going to have 4 answers, okay? So we have plus or minus 1/2. So where is sine equal to 1/2? Pi over 6. Pi over 6 in all 4 quadrants. All right, number 4. First step in solving and getting sine all by itself. -1. Connor, what's next? divide by 2. Did you get stuck in traffic too?
Yeah.
The traffic's real bad. Everybody else, I guess, is running late at the same time, huh? All right, divide by 2, just like Connor said. So we're negative 1/2. So at this point, guys, unless you're been using this up here, if you're not using it, you got to find some way now of determining what the value is. If you're doing this, that's great. Make sure you start writing it down then on every single paper you have. Because after this problem, I'm going to erase it and I won't be up there again, okay? We're starting to kind of wean that off a little bit. So what I always do for sine, especially, and so I do this when I'm asking you guys, when I'm talking to you guys, I'm like, okay, hey, what is the sine of, or the sine of what angle gives you is 1/2. And what I'm doing up there is in my hand, I'm going, okay, sine is the number of fingers down. So I actually will turn in my ring finger and be like, okay, that's 30 degrees, or pi over 6. I use the hand trick all the time is what I do. Because to me, there's no memorizing that. It's just this. Now, it is memorizing the process. If you do it a lot, it'll become second nature. I mean, I've done it so often now, it's just those fingers automatically kind of fold back after I say things. So, where's sine 1/2? And radians, what is it? Pi over 6. All right. So sine is 1/2 at pi over 6. So what I do is this now. And I'm going to start showing you the steps I use to do this. So the sine of x is pi over 6. Okay? But then I need to make it negative. So where is y negative? Third and fourth quadrant. Very good. So we'll put this pi over 6 in the third and fourth quadrants. So that means we have to add 1 for the third quadrant. We have to double and subtract 1 for the fourth quadrant. I've done that twice so far. I would not be a very good drummer. All my body parts work dependently together. I can't do one thing and do something else with the other. If I say 4, I'm going to write 4 instead of drawing a 6. It happens all the time. All right, so there you go, guys. It's our step. So the first 2 was pretty straightforward. You didn't have to really do any solving. All you had to do is just figure out what angle gives you those values. Number 3 and 4 took 2 steps to solve. Actually, 3 steps on number 3 because you had to take the square root. So now let's move on to the next one. You don't say. So 5 and 6. Let's solve this one. So what's the first thing in solving and getting cosine by itself? What do you notice is a problem? There's cosine on both sides. I need 1. I need to find a way of combining those. So what do we do to make those come together? There you go. What's next? Andy? Not yet. We will. That'll be last week. -1. There you go. We will divide by 2 though, Andy. Just not yet. Now what do we do, Andy? There you go. Alright, so now we're left with this setup here. Cosine of what angle gives us -1/2. So at this point, as I'm talking to you guys, I'm thinking of, okay, the number of fingers on top, because its cosine needs to be 1. So now I'm thinking it is going to be 60 degrees, or what, guys, in radians? Pi over 3. Pi over 3 is the reference angle. But then we have to go in and say, okay, it has to be negative. So where is cosine negative? Say it again. Very good. Right there. I'm circling where, because we're asking for negative. Remember, this trig tells us where trig functions are positive. So I'm looking where cosine is not. Cosine is located in all. Cosine is located in, of course, cosine. So this second and third is the quadrants we need to put pi over 3 in. Of course, we've talked about this many times. Get used to this here. Let's take the denominator and subtract 1 and add 1, and there's our two answers. So 2 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3. All right, moving on to number 6. Carly, what do we do? Divide by 3. Sam, what's next?
Square root.
Very good. Square roots. So, oops, not squared anymore. Square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 3 is square root of 3. And it's plus or minus. We're taking the square root. I'm not going to rationalize this. I'll leave it in simplified form, okay? Because for me, that's easier to read. Because again, when we're talking about the hand trick, tangent, you flip your hand over. And I need to have 1 finger on top and 3 on bottom, which means it's this one here. By doing that, 1 over square root of 3. Do y'all see that? So we look over, we flip it over, and this is how many degrees? 30. This one's 30, or what in radians, guys? Pi over 6. There you go. And like I said before, it's plus or minus, so great. We'll put it in all 4 quadrants now. All right, last one. Let's talk about tangent being undefined. How is a fraction undefined? 0 on the bottom. That's kind of what I write. I say no. Number on top and 0 on bottom means it's undefined. So I got to figure out, it's tangent, so I flip my hand over. I got to figure out how to get 0 fingers on bottom. What finger do I tuck in to get 0 fingers on bottom? Well, if I go ahead and do this one, I'm still left with 1. But if I do the thumb, what's on bottom? There's nothing left. So I got to come over here, and what does that thumb represent? Pi over 2. Pi over 2, guys, and if I was to do it a different way, pi over 2, if we were to write the coordinates of pi over 2, it's 0, positive 1. And as we talked about tangent many times last class, I'll write it again. Y over x. Well, if I was to use these coordinates of the location of pi over 2, let's plug those in. Well, y is equal to 1 and x is equal to 0, and we've set up the 0 on the bottom, right? And one thing we got to think about here too, is there, and actually if you want to, guys, where tangent is undefined is when x equals 0. Where tangent is undefined is when x equals 0. So I'm going to go ahead I'll write that down, because is it x equal to 0 somewhere else on the unit circle? 2 head nods in the back. Sam says yes as well. Connor joining in, or just getting over a yawn? Yawn. Ryan? All right. Y'all agree, that's great. Now let's go ahead and get the answer. So where is x also equal to 0 on the unit circle? Very good. That's right. The very top and very bottom is where our 0, where x is equal to 0. Pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. So, little side note here. About 5 years ago is when I did pre-cal. We started off the year with this stuff and ended with the stuff you've already done. We flipped the 2 semesters. Somebody thought, that just seems backwards. Let's flip it the other way. And looking at you guys now and seeing the glazed look over your faces, being the second semester and some of y'all seniors know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I just got to get through this and just see what I can do to just get by. We should be doing it the other way. Because all this stuff is brand new stuff. Last semester was review stuff. This stuff's brand new. And what we come up to in the next 3 months, guys, 4 months-ish, is all brand new as well. So just be ready for it, okay? All brand new stuff. So just be ready for it. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to degrees. And some of y'all did this, which I saw some people come and ask some questions for me in class during power lunch and stuff. Some of y'all have already done this, which is awesome. Like I said, guys, the more of these problems you do, the better. The more you do without me, even better. Because I'm holding your hand through all this stuff. Try to do something on your own and see what you can get done on your own. Okay? So let's move on to the next one. So we are going to use, as you read in the instructions, it says we're going to use the degrees. So let's use the degrees now. So now we look at tangent of x being the square root of 3. However, when we look at tangent, guys, if I was to do the hand trick, I flip the hand over, tangent is always a fraction, right, guys? Tangent is always a fraction. It's something over something. It's the top over the bottom. It's the sine over cosine. It's the y over x. It's always a fraction. So anytime you see a tangent problem that you've got to solve for, make it a fraction. Turn it into a fraction. Because now what you see is, oh, I see 3 over 1. Okay, so if I'm doing the hand trick, 3 fingers on top, 1 on bottom, that matches exactly what needs to be here. 3 over 1. So I look over, and what's the degrees of the pointing finger or index finger? 60. So it's 60 degrees is our reference angle, guys. 60 degrees is our reference angle. And now all we have to do is figure out where tangent is positive. So where is tangent positive? What quadrants? Third and first one. Good. Remember, all is that one. Every single trig function is going to be in the first if it's positive. So let's put 60 degrees reference angle in the first. Hey, that's already done, right? 60 degrees reference angle in the first is 60 degrees. Now let's put in the third quadrant. So what is the angle for that? Close. Very close. It's 60 degrees past 180. 240. Yep. Yep, there you go. And there you go. Third quadrant, guys, just add it to 180. Second quadrant, subtract it from 180. So I guess I'll do that here. Plus 180, subtract 180, subtract 360. Of course, if you subtract 360, you're going to get negative. If you subtract 180, you're going to get negative, but you guys get the idea. Just take it away from 180. Or take it away from 360, if I want to say it that way. That's kind of elementary, but there you go. All right, moving on to the next one, number 9. Gabe, what do we do here to get cosine all by itself? First step. Good. Dylan, what do we do next? Square root. Well done. I'm just going to make them both square root. All right, it's plus or minus, which means it's going to be all 4 quadrants, our answer. So that's one thing we don't have to worry about in the future. So square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 4 is 2. So all we have to do is figure out where cosine is 1/2 and put it in all 4 quadrants. So where's cosine 1/2, guys? Careful. Yeah, you got to mix that. It's 60. So cosine is the number of fingers on top. So it's going to be this one for that, or if you're over there, it's the one on that. bottom. Yeah, you bet. So again, it's 90 degrees, 0 degrees. First quadrant, right? That's why you always use your left hand on it. So there's your first quadrant. 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 60. We're just going up like you would see to normal. Then all you do now is sine is the number of fingers on the bottom when you tuck in a finger, whichever it might be, whatever angle it might be. Sine is the number of fingers, square root, the number of fingers on bottom over 2. Cosine over 2. Because every time you do it, it's always over 2. Remember when we did this over here, guys? Yeah. It was this big line and 2 was on the bottom. Well, for the hand trick, you just always say it's over 2. It's always just, it's a given over 2. Never messes you up. So then after that, you say, okay. So then I go through and say, okay, after I tuck in the finger for a certain degrees, whatever it might be, 0, 30, 45, 60, or 90. Let's say it's 60. I tuck in this finger here. Sine is a square root of the number of fingers on bottom divided by 2. So the sine of 60 degrees is a square root of 3 over 2. Cosine of 60 degrees is 1, or the square root of 1, which is 1 over 2. If I'm doing 45 degrees, sine, square root of 2 over 2. Cosine, square root of 2 over 2. 30 degrees, sine of 30, square root of 1, or 1 over 2. Cosine, square root of 3 over 2. And now we talk about these special ones here, right? 0 degrees. Sine, number of fingers on bottom, there isn't any. So it's 0 over 2, which is 0. Number of fingers on top, 1, 2, 3, 4. Square root of 4 over 2, which reduces to 1. Cosine. Tangent, you do the exact same process, guys, except you turn your hand over. Because remember, guys, number of fingers, so on. Now it's kind of backwards. So the idea is I say, okay, cosine is the number of fingers on top, and I need to have one finger available on top, which means I have to tuck in my index finger. This cosine of whatever this is gives me 1 square root of 1 over 2, or 1/2. That's exactly what I need for this problem, right? So then I look at it and say, what finger did I tuck in? 60 degrees. This one's 60 degrees. And like I said, 0, 30, 45, 60, 90. So it's 60, and now we go ahead and put the 60 in all 4 quadrants. And like I told you, it's going to be minus 180, plus 180, minus 360. So what's 180 minus 60? 60 plus 180? And then finally, 360 minus 60. All right, number 10. Michaela, what do I do first? We'll save that for last. There you go. And then what do we do last, Michaela? There we go. And now we go through and say, okay, sine, number of fingers on bottom, needs to be 3. 1, 2, 3. Tuck that one in. And so what angle is this we're talking about? 60. Perfect. 60 degrees. And so I kind of write it here just to help me know that's the reference angle. However, what quadrant do we need to be in where sine is negative? Good job. The bottom 2. So we need to put 60 degrees into the third and fourth quadrants. So, what is 60 degrees in the third quadrant? Good. What is 60 degrees in the fourth quadrant? There you go. So I had a meeting with Miss Hines, the other teacher. She's been teaching pre-cal straight all the way through for like the past 7 years. I'm like, okay, how can I get to these students about doing this? Is there an easier way to do it? And she's like, it's basically just showing you stuff and just going through it. And that's it. There's no trick along the way or fun-filled activity we could do. I could have you do a problem and share with somebody else, and then you two share with somebody else, and you four share with somebody else, or however you want to do that stuff. When it comes down to it, guys, it's just solving. It's the same thing as factoring, guys. We can show you the box method. We can show you the slide and divide. We can show you all these other methods. When it comes down to it, you just got to know how to factor. And that's the same thing here, guys. So, and the way you do factoring, you saw factoring in Algebra 1. You saw it in geometry. You saw a lot of it in Algebra 2. You're going to see it in pre-cal. Okay, we're going to be doing factoring pretty soon here for a moment as well. And guess what? You go off to college and take college algebra, you're going to see a lot of it there. If you decide to go up to another level of college, some business classes make you take some other type of business algebra, you'll see it there. It does not go away. Okay? So just be aware of that. All right, so let's go ahead. Tangent plus 1 equals 1. Tanner, what's the first step here? Subtract 1. Actually, it's the first and only step, isn't it? All right, so we're dealing with tangent. So we got to realize we're looking at, I'll step off to the side here and say y over x. Usually helps me out. If we're doing the hand trick here, guys, tangent, flip over, I need 0. And the deal is, as I told you guys, we need to make sure that it is a fraction, right? And I could put it over 1, I could put it over any number because it's 0 on top. No matter what, it's 0. So for the purposes of the hand trick, and I'll explain to you later because you can see it, I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, I'm flipping my hand over. I need 0 fingers on top, and of course everything else left on bottom, right? So the only finger that I can tuck in that gives me 0 fingers on top is the pinky, right? So if I flip it over, what is that? Yes, it is. 0. So the angle's 0 degrees. And all we have to do now is say, okay, where else is 0 going to be divided? So if I come over here, at 0 degrees, the coordinates is what? 1, 0, is that right? 0 over 1. Where else does it kind of look like that? Yep. We're in degrees, so it's at pi. What's the coordinates for pi, guys? Negative 1 over 0. Which if we were to divide y over x here, guys, we would still get 0 over negative 1, which still gives you 0, right? On the quiz, on the test, if you just get 1, that's great. Just partial off if you don't get the other one, okay? So it's not a big thing if you don't get the other one. As long as you get 1, you get the idea. All right. The next one, guys, after doing what we've done this morning so far, this next one's going to be pretty simple. It goes back to your Algebra 2 days and says, using the graph below, identify 2 trig functions on the graph above. Oh, no, this one's doing differently. It's making us write the equations, isn't it? Let's skip down to 13. Let's skip down to 13. Determine the number of solutions, which basically asks, oh my gosh, where do they intersect? Where do they intersect each other? So we go through here from 0 to 2 pi. Well, 0 to 2 pi is from here out to here. How many times do the two graphs cross each other? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Answer is 5. Next interval, negative 2 pi to pi. So it's the whole entire graph, isn't it? So then we go back again. Where do they intersect? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then finally, negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. Negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. I see 1, 2. Any others? We're done. We're not going to write the equations. Okay? All right. I'm going to have you go ahead and do those two problems, guys, 1 and 2 as a warm-up. Using, remember, the instructions are in radians, so make sure your answer is in radians. So go through and figure out the tangent of what angles is undefined, and then find out 2 times sine of what angle gives you, or plus square root of 3 gives you 0.